This is episode number 32 featuring Jim Wodark. Welcome to the Plein Air podcast from Plein Air Magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. In the Plein Air podcast, we dive into the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air painting, plein air is, of course, a French term meaning outside. French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. It doesn't matter how you say it. What matters is that there's a huge movement of artists around the world going outdoors to paint. It's a lot of fun, and this show is all about that movement, the painters, collectors, galleries, the art, etc. This week's podcast brought to you by the Plein Air Convention, which is the world's largest gathering of plein air artists in history. It's a big educational event, going out painting every day. It's fun. It's for everybody, from beginners to pros. April in San Diego. Learn more at pleinairconvention.com. It's my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your friends. If you have feedback or interview requests, email me, Eric at pleinairmagazine.com. Today's interview is brought to you by Lilidol Video Productions, new video oil painting for beginning painters with Laurel Daniel. You can find it at Lily, L-I-L-I, lilyartvideo.com. Let's get right to the interview with Jim Wodark. Today we have Jim Wodark, who's a fabulous painter, fabulous plein air painter as well. And Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So where are you right this very minute?
I'm sitting in my car in my garage.
Please don't start it.
Yeah, I won't.
Life's not that bad. Life's not that bad. So you're
the
sitting.
The three kids are home for Christmas, and so I'm trying to avoid any interruptions.
Yeah, so they're going to come out and knock on the window. Dad, what are you doing in the car?
Right, yeah. Well, we got new phones for them, so I'm sure they have a million questions.
Oh, man. So what age are your kids?
I have twin girls that are 16, and then my son is 18.
Wow. That's a big job.
Yeah, they're getting big, man. Unbelievable.
So have you supported your family as an artist completely, or do you have something else that you've done on the side?
Well, I've kind of had an interesting journey. My wife is a high school teacher, a French teacher. So when our son was born, I was the guy who stayed home and took care of him, and same with the girls. So I've been a stay-at-home worker, I guess, if you want to call it, doing the dad job, and then I've been painting too. So
how have you juggled that? Because when the kids were little, obviously they weren't in school. Were you able to get much painting done at that time?
No. You can't do anything. I couldn't do anything when I had kids other than taking care of the kids, which is one of the hardest jobs ever, I think. But I would put them in daycare 3 days a week just to keep my career alive, and that the money I made a lot of the times would just pay for the daycare during those beginning years, because I started painting actually when my son was born. So I've been doing that for 18 years, I guess.
So you're juggling a family now. Are you, because of the age of the kids, able to be gone and go to plein air events, or are you kind of waiting until they're all off in college?
No, I've been escaping a lot lately. It's easier when they're older, a little kind of easier, because they're hopefully the work I did earlier in their lives is paying off, and they're staying organized and keeping on with school and homework and things like that. It's still really important to be a parent, especially at this age with the girls.
Clearly.
But I've been able to go off to, I think I did 6 or 7 plein air events this year, which is a lot, seemingly to me. But I've been doing, been going off for ever since they started elementary school. I was able to really start focusing a lot of time on art because I knew I had. From the time they were gone to school to the time they came home, I had to paint something. I had a block of time, so it actually helped me produce stuff that way.
Now, when you were going through that period of time with the kids and you were putting them in daycare and so on, were you going out and doing plein air painting, or were you pretty much doing studio painting?
I was going out and plein air painting a lot around here in Southern California. I likened it to having a 50-mile chain on my ankle. Because I'd have to be home to, I had to go pick them up when they got done, and then the rest of the day was mostly about parenting and not painting.
Well, let's dive back into the history here for just briefly. I don't want to linger in it too long, but give me a feel for how this all began. How did you get involved in art in the beginning? You said you started painting when your son was a baby, but give me a feel for the background on this.
All right. When I was 25, I quit my job. I was working at a health club, and I took a seminar about having breakthroughs in life. And in that seminar, I realized that I really did want to be an artist my whole life, but I was just too scared to do it. And so I just did it. I just quit my job and started doing cartooning for a living. That's what I wanted to do, was be a cartoonist.
And who were you doing cartooning for?
It was my own company. I did whatever I could do to make money at it, and I came up with a product where I made cartoon maps of college campuses, and I sold coupons that were around this poster I would make of the campus. And that worked really well. You'd hand them out when school started, and the students would go crazy over them, and businesses would get the coupons in. And so I did that. I had that business for about 15 years. I had partners in it, and we would go around the country to different campuses and draw maps and sell coupons. And that was a really, really great learning experience for me. And at the same time, I was trying to develop a cartoon strip because I wanted to be like Gary Larson. That cartoonist guy. And I had some strips in some college papers, but I never got into the bigger papers. It was almost impossible to get syndicated. So I wanted to come out. I came out to California. I grew up in Colorado, and I came out to California to try to get more cartoon business. And then I met my wife out here, and she was taking a watercolor class, and so I took one, and she was just doing it for fun. So I started farting around with watercolors and acrylic paints. And then when our son was born, I took a oil plein air class down in Laguna Beach. And it was like, oh, this is the medium I was trying to get to with that other stuff.
Who taught the class?
A guy named John Eagle, really great guy down in Laguna Beach. And it was just it was really great for me because I loved the way oils worked versus acrylic and watercolor. And so when our son was born, she made more money than I did and had better health coverage. So I stayed home and just quit cartooning and focused on oil painting, because I really saw that I could like it, and I thought I would do it for a long time. So, well,
when you look back on that, it probably was a real blessing in the sense that you didn't have to report into somebody else's job every day. And even though you had to report in at home and take care of the kids, once you got them to that point where you could get a little bit of free time, that was probably a beautiful thing.
It was. It actually helped me focus a lot knowing that I had a section, a little segment of time during the day. I had to produce something, because I knew that if I didn't, nothing would happen the rest of the day as far as art was concerned. So it was pretty good fit for me. I think I did a good job being a parent, and it's been great painting, really great.
So what do you think are the milestones? If you were to look back now and say there was maybe one or two moments in time when you went from being a guy trying to paint to an artist who was actually making a living painting, what do you think those milestones were?
It's a good question. Well, that's a good one. A lot of it has been one of my intentions when I paint is to have a breakthrough in art every time I paint a picture, which kind of sounds a little nutty, but it focuses me, and when I remember that to do that, a lot of times it'll happen. I'll have a breakthrough where I'll be painting at one level, and all of a sudden I'll jump up and I'll paint at another level and continue on at that level. I think one of them was the Raymar panel company. They make painting panels. They started a year-long painting competition, and which I just thought was brilliant. Because you could enter it online. You didn't have to have the painting with you, and I entered as many as I could over the 12 months that they had the show, and I won, I think, 3 prizes at the end. I won 2nd place and 9th place and 16th place or something like that. So that was a big deal because that was the first kind of national competition that I won something in.
Well, I think that, as you know, we have Plein Air Salon, which is an art competition, and Raymar really did start it all, as far as I can tell. And I think that these competitions play a really important role because as artists, we never get much feedback, especially if we're sequestered in our home studios or our homes. And, we have our friends and family and mothers and fathers and people telling us nice things about our paintings, but you really don't know how you hold up, how you stack up until you enter these competitions. And
right, exactly.
It really is an opportunity to elevate your growth because when you look at the quality of the people who are entering or the people who are winning, you have to say to yourself, okay, do I stand up to this? Do I can I paint as well as that? And surprisingly, a lot of people who don't think they do or don't think they could end up winning. Is that what happened to you?
Well, I think that's a great point because for some reason I love competitions. I think it was maybe my athletic background in sports and stuff. But I loved entering them, and that was exactly what I would think of. Is like, well, how I got to beat that guy. Look at how good his painting is. Is can I paint that good? And it would motivate me to try to do a better painting, whatever that would be. And so I've entered a lot of competitions that way.
Well, you mentioned the California Art Club. You're a member of that, and I think that one of the best things they ever did was bring back or recreate the Gold Medal Awards. They've changed it recently so that they're approaching it differently. They have a Gold Medal show now, but not a Gold Medal Award.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of competing with others is really important because I remember talking to Peter and Elaine Adams who said that really when they started the competition up again, it really helped people really strive to do their best. And if they didn't get in that year, they'd try harder the next year. And what it did is it made everybody better painters.
Yep. I think there's something to that, even though it's hard to compare each painting to another painting, when you judge something. Like I just judged the Bold Brush competition, which is an online deal for November. And I think there was almost 2,000 entries in the thing. And you're going through all these paintings, and it's like, well, God, that's a good one. This is a good one. That's a good one. And it was very interesting. But it does, I think there's really is something to that. It makes you paint better. And like the last year, I entered the Gold Medal show and didn't get in, and this year I got in with a bigger painting. So, but it did. It made it like I've tried harder to try to get into it this year because I was pissed that I didn't get into it last year.
Well, when you're judging a competition too, like you, I judge a lot of these things, and I see patterns that emerge when you're judging. First off, the quality leaps off the page. Now, there are lots and lots and lots of great paintings that are of high quality, but when you get down to the point of narrowing it down, you go from 2,000 entries or 1,000 entries down to the top 500 and then down to the top 100 and so on. You start to notice patterns. What patterns do you notice?
Well, I noticed, like this latest one was, there was some paintings that were technically really well done, but there was no, they were boring.
There was no emotion.
Right. It was something about it was just boring. And it's like, wow, it's such an education from my end as far as an artist. Every time I do judging, it reveals my own bias to what I like, for one. And then also it makes me realize, like, if I'm going to enter a painting, or when I do, not even a painting for a show, but just painting, it's like, oh, this is what's missing when you have a painting and it doesn't work. It's like, well, what wasn't right about that? Well, what was missing? And a lot of that you can see in other paintings when I'm judging them. It's like, okay, well, it's really well done, but there's no emotion in it, or it's rendered well, but the light is so flat that it dulls out the painting. And it's very, very educational to do it and to see areas that I can improve on myself when I paint.
So you're teaching now, is that correct?
I don't teach a lot, but yeah, I do teach every so often. I is so busy with the kids and with my just trying to paint pictures that I haven't spent a lot of time focusing on making a teaching career with painting.
So in the rare times that you are teaching, or maybe just in terms of some of the things you've realized, you talked about having breakthroughs when you're painting, every time you're painting. How is that possible? What is the mindset that you put yourself in? How do you force these breakthroughs to occur?
Well, one is just mostly having that as a vision for my art, or a statement to live by. So that's what I'm committed to when I start painting. And the other thing is to try to be aware of that, be conscious to that intention when I start a picture. And the other thing, I think, like I was just doing that before we got on this phone call, I'm doing a little study for potentially maybe a bigger piece, and I think one of the best ways to get into that mode is to ask myself a question, or to be exploring a particular idea. Because when I find myself in a position where I'm trying to answer a question, my mind and I get into much more of a creative state, because I don't know the answer, and my brain tries to figure it out, and that I found that puts me in a creative state versus when I've had somebody says, "Oh, I want that painting exactly the way it was, same size, same everything." It's very hard to feel creative painting that picture again, because you already figured out the problems and the answers are already there. So that's really a challenge. You almost feel like a copy machine when you do that, which I don't do very often. But that's one of the biggest things, is to ask myself a question that I'm trying to answer, or to explore a technique that I haven't done before, or that I want to learn more about. Like this painting I was doing this morning, I did one earlier, or last week, which was I started it very abstractly, because I like to look at other people's paintings and see what they do, and what do I like about them. And I was looking at Jeremy Mann's work, and I saw some work that Brian Mark Taylor's been doing recently, and a lot of those paintings are so abstract, and then they kind of carve out certain details, and it turns it into a door, or a person, or a figure. So I was exploring that recently, and it just makes it more fun. But I find that that's what propels me further to doing better paintings and breaking through maybe areas where I wasn't.
So, what's your patience level on a painting? Are you taking a lot of time when you're doing a studio piece? Are you producing lots and lots of them? Are you producing very few? What's that all look like?
Well, that's I have to be home for one to do a studio piece, and then I have to have a block of time that I can focus on it. I seem to last about 3 or 4 hours of intense concentration, and then my brain gets tired, and I have to stop and do something else. But I don't spend like weeks on a painting. I think there's a certain speed to painting while you're painting, and if you're going too slow, if I go too slow, it makes me think too much, and if I go too fast, then you make errors that way because you get paint too thick too quickly or too sloppily. So there's a certain speed to it, and that's sometimes when you're in that zone that you can feel that, and that's what I'm talking about. When about 3 or 4 hours you kind of fall out of that zone because you just get tired mentally of making all those decisions. So a 30 by 40 should take me about 3 or 4 days to do in that kind of setup.
Okay.
I think.
Well, it's interesting because everybody's different. And, we talk to a lot of different people, and some people will spend months on a 30 by 40, and some people will knock them out in a couple of days, and they're all good. It's just a matter of, what's in the head of the painter and what they're trying to communicate. Why do you do this? What is it about creating paintings that drives you?
Well, the reason why I started doing artwork is because I love being outside. I love to see things that are beautiful. So that's actually something I thought about a lot because I like to make vision statements of what's my vision for art and why am I doing this. And it's mostly a way I can make a difference in the world. I can paint something that I think is beautiful, and I think it's a beautiful painting, and people, if it's good enough and people respond to it, they'll hang that in their house, and I think that makes a difference in their life because it changes how their space is when they come home, and they get a look at this painting, and it takes them away to whatever I was trying to communicate at the time. So that's the main reason I do it, is to make a difference and to bring beauty into the world.
Well, you're knocking them out of the park. You had several paintings in our show at the Plein Air Convention. For people who don't know, the Plein Air Convention that we do in April has its own art show, and we have a faculty art show along with an attendee art show. And you had put in a couple of pieces in the art show, and I remember because it was, in the path you had to walk by. You had this piece in the art show, and I kept walking by, and I kept being drawn to that piece. It was horses in a canyon, and you had managed to make the scale feel massive. It was a tiny painting. It must have been an 8 by 10 or something, and yet it felt, you could feel the weight of those giant mountains behind these horses. And I kept walking by that, and I kept saying to myself, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy that. And sure enough, somebody else bought it. And but I think you sold more paintings in that show than any other artist, because every time you'd replace one with another, it would sell. And so there's something about your paintings that are definitely speaking to people.
Yeah, it's exciting, and I feel, I guess blessed would be the word, because there's so many artists out there, and so many good artists out there. It's just, feel lucky that people like my work so much. And
they like me. They really, really like me.
Yeah.
So one thing I've noticed about your work, and I'm not sure I can articulate it, maybe you can to help out, but you seem to be masterful at creating compositions that really draw you in. Is there some particular thought or method to what you do in your compositions?
Well, that's the probably the most interesting part about painting. I remember when I first started, I read Edgar Payne's outdoor composition book, and he has little thumbnail drawings that he does, and he classified all landscapes into certain styles. Like there was an S composition and a steel yard and a triangle shape, and so I would draw thumbnail sketches of scenes when I was out painting, and I would think about that. Oh, this is an S, this is a thumb, whatever he would call them, and that I did that for a while, and then I took another workshop with a guy named Ian Roberts, who I'd really never heard of before, and you hardly ever hear of him, but something about his workshop just really got me. And he designed a composition more like an armature, like when you do a clay, it's a three-dimensional, you have a stick with wires coming off of it for whatever you're going to make. So he would use the lines that you initially drew for a sketch as your armature, and your eye gets led around by those lines. And I really liked that idea a lot better than classifying it into a pre-designed shape like paint would do, because it was a more organic kind of feeling idea instead of, it was something where you explored it more instead of, I already know it's going to be this. And that made it more interesting to me. But ever since then, I've been doing a lot of thumbnail sketches and sketchbooks. And I stopped for a little while, stopped doing that. I took a workshop with Ken Oster, and he didn't do that because he wanted to design on the canvas, and it made it more engaging, I think, to him, at least at the time that I took the workshop. He might have changed that idea since then, but so I tried that out, and then I went on a painting camping trip with my friend Paul Cratter and some other artists, and Paul had this awesome sketchbook, and he does all these thumbnail sketches, and I'm looking through it, and I'm going, man, am I missing the boat? So I started doing that again. I don't know, it was about 5 years ago. And so I do that a lot. I really draw a lot of compositions, and what I'll do is before I pick up my children, I'll go earlier to the place, and I'll sit in my car with my book, and I'll start drawing out ideas of what I want to paint. Instead of having to look at something, I'll just make up something. And that kind of draws upon my cartoon background. When I did cartoons, I didn't look at anything to draw my cartoons. I just drew my cartoons. They were my style. They came out the way they came out. And I thought about that when I was painting. It's like, why do I have to look at that to paint it? Can I just make it up? Why do I have to replicate this scene exactly? What if I move stuff around and I compose it differently to make it a better composition? Because a lot of times what you're given on location isn't the best designed painting. So I've been doing that more and more and more, and it's really, really fun. But it makes me think about composition all the time when I'm doing that, and designing, and how this shape relates to the shape next to it, and inside the shape of the square or the rectangle that you're going to paint in.
I think that's a very important point for the novice painters, because a lot of people are purists, and they say, look, go outside and paint exactly what you see. But there may be, what you see is perfect in its own way, but it doesn't necessarily make a perfect painting, but it makes great elements. So it's okay to move a tree or a rock or anything, right? Yeah, right. It's where that rock is placed is distracting most of the time, let's say, in your design. If you put, there's a rock in front of me, I'm going to just have to put that there because it's there. And then it ends up blocking your entry into the picture that you designed. But people do that all the time. And I did the same thing when I started painting, because you're just trying to figure out how to do it. But that idea of drawing and designing something before you get going really makes a difference. If you have a map of a path of where you're going to go, then you can paint more confidently as you lay it down. Versus if you have an unplanned area, you tend to be more hesitant in that area, and it gets you don't know where you're going, so your brush doesn't know where it's going. Right. But it's interesting, whenever I've taught people, that's one of the main things I try to get them to do. And most people don't like to draw, so they don't do it. They just want to get into color. But I think what happens is we all get anxious. We see something that really speaks to us, and we want to just get it done, get it out on canvas. And sometimes they just don't turn out because we're rushing too much. Now, what is your speed like when you're outdoors painting? Once you've done your thumbnail sketch, is it slow and meticulous? Is it rapid? What's that look like?
comes and goes that way, I guess. Once I have my design figured out, then I lay that out on the canvas, and depends on the subject that you're looking at also and what you're trying to say. Certain times the subject is going to change quickly. Like if you're painting the Grand Canyon, the shadows move so quickly. The sun comes, as the sun's coming up, those shadows just disappear, and all that different lighting and effects really change dramatically. So you have to figure out where you need to paint quickly, and then where you can slow down a little bit. So sometimes it's quick, like getting the shapes in, the shadow shapes in. It might be a quicker, faster method, and then adding some of the edges and details will slow you down a little bit.
So one thing I always like to do is to give some tips for people who are painting, either newbies, people who are brand new at painting. What do you think is the early process that they should go through? And then I like to touch base on some things that help us all. Sometimes those of us who have been painting for a long time think that we've heard it all, and then sure enough, we go and study with somebody and they completely approach things differently, and we hear things or see things or tips or techniques that we've never picked up on before. So let's start with the newbies. What's your best advice for somebody who's just kind of getting into painting? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to start drawing, because most people don't draw, and it's such a key to being able to render painting. So if you can't draw perspective, you won't be able to paint perspective. And the key to drawing, what I think drawing and designing is it opens up a tremendous amount of creativity and different and more unique paintings. So that would be my main thing to tell people. Even though it's not painting, it's drawing, I would say that would be the main thing, is get them into drawing. I was listening to your interview with Charlie Hunter, and that's he's so great at that. But it's all the people that I think that do really well are really good at drawing.
Talk about a sketchbook. Next time you're at the Plein Air Convention, which you're going to be at, Charlie's going to be at, ask to see his sketchbook. His sketchbook is phenomenal, and what's interesting is that he doesn't necessarily do every painting on location, but he does everything from his sketches. And so he can do 10 sketches for every painting, and as a result, he'll go out and just sketch all day and then come back to the studio and do these amazing pieces. So
that's what's great about sketching, is you come up with different ideas that you wouldn't have thought of the first time around when you're looking at a scene, and that makes all of a sudden maybe the third sketch you have is such a better idea than the first instinct that you had. It's just a great way to go. That would be the main thing, and then just to paint shapes instead of objects. But that also comes back to drawing. Is the more you draw, the more you realize that you're drawing the outline of shapes interacting with other shapes. And if beginner painters could just try to squint their eyes and focus on the shadow shape and the light shape, it makes it easier for them to compose and get a decent painting out.
Yeah. So you can even do what's called a no-tan, which is basically a sketch of the lights and the darks only. The for the early paint or early person who wants to learn to draw, it's okay to say, hey, just draw more. But how do you get to a proficient level? Do you recommend any particular type of training or anything in particular that would be helpful to people wanting to learn to draw?
No, I don't know anything about that that I could think of.
Okay. Well, that's okay. That's fine. So in terms of things that might be helpful for somebody who is fairly adept at painting and has been doing it for a while, is there anything that you've discovered that maybe you do differently or you approach differently?
Tough question.
That's my job.
That's a good question. Probably once you're proficient at it, you know what you're doing, then it's more mental, as far as, what do you want to do? What's missing with where you're at? And that comes from, you can tell what that is if you explore, what do I want to have happen with my painting? And if you can get clear on that statement, and saying, this is what I want. I want to be able to do this, 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 and this, and I want my paintings to be this kind of painting or this level of painting. And if that's written out and you're clear on that, then you'll see the gap from where you are to where you want to be, and you can kind of paint in that gap. I don't know if that's the best way to say it, but it gives you something to shoot for.
It's kind of hard to articulate something that it's kind of like telling someone how to drive a car or
right.
Yeah. It's how to make a masterpiece meal. There's recipes, and then there's the feel, and it's so hard to articulate that feel.
Right.
So,
and in my quest to do masterpieces, it's like it's such a gap for me, as far as I don't think my paintings are masterpieces. I'm not quite sure what that would look like, but it creates space from where I'm at to where I want to be, and that motivates me to move forward instead of saying, "Oh yeah, I've made it," because then it wouldn't be as interesting to do, I think.
Absolutely. So, who are the painters of the past that perhaps have really inspired you?
I mean, dead guys or just...
Well, we could start with the dead ones.
Well, I love looking at, a lot of painters, impressionists, and just anybody who paints. Of course, Monet, and I think I really liked his work. I liked Van Gogh's work, but I like Monet's better. I liked Edgar Payne's work. I really like his work, which has influenced my work a bit. William Wendt, Hanson Puthoff. Those are just, it's great to look at those things, and I'm lucky enough that there's a museum, the Irvine Museum out here has a great collection of that work. So, I've gone and looked at that before. But that's the other thing that's kind of nice about here. There's a painting group called Laguna Plein Air Painters. That's been around for, I don't know, as long as I can remember practically. And that was, when you were saying one of the milestones, I wanted to become a signature member in that group forever, and I finally, got a signature member status in that group. I don't know, it was about 8 or 9 years ago. But that was a big deal, because it was really hard to get in there.
Yeah, well, it's a great group, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And I had some great painters, like Ken Oster recently passed away, and he was one of the guys I took a couple workshops with, I think, or one workshop with. But I really liked his style and admired his ability to think up new ideas. That's what I thought was really neat about his work. His compositions were interesting. His ideas were different. And he's a good guy. But there's so many good living artists too that are just inspiring to look at, and like Ray Roberts is a guy who I really like. What I've watched him, he was a signature member when I wanted to be a signature member, and he just keeps getting better and better, and it's really neat to watch him grow, and it's inspiring. Jeremy Lipking, I love his work. Jeremy Mann's another really neat way he paints is very interesting.
Absolutely, some fabulous painters alive today, and maybe more so than any time in history. The painters that are living today, the plein air movement has really blossomed. As you know, when we started this magazine, the plein air movement was going on, but the only real thing behind the movement was the Plein Air Painters of America and probably Laguna Plein Air Painters, and it has just really blossomed. And as a result, the last 10, 15 years of people studying under some of these great painters, we're really producing a lot of fabulous painters today.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I think this time of in our country and in the world is there's enough income and food, and you don't have to run around trying to catch an animal to eat or something. So we have more time to explore it, and it's incredible how many painters there are, just a plethora of them, and it's exciting to see the plein air movement going so well.
So you're going to be at the Plein Air Convention. You're a field painter this year, is that right?
I'm a field painter, and I'm also doing a talk about supplies before the convention starts. I think is it the day before?
You're doing the basics course.
Right, yeah. I did that last year, and that was kind of fun. And it's one of the, I think, it's not the most glamorous thing to talk about, but it's still important, is getting the right kind of equipment to paint with, especially when you're going outside.
Yeah, so for the people who don't know, the morning before the convention starts about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so we have an optional plein air basics course, basically painting plein air for beginners. And so we get a lot of people who want to learn about plein air painting, and they're a little intimidated maybe to come to the convention because they don't know anything about it. And or they're very early stage and they're making a lot of mistakes, which is very common. I remember when I first started plein air painting, you've heard this story a million times, Jim, but when I first started plein air painting, I drug a studio easel and a box and a card table and a bunch of stuff out to the golf course where there was this view. And it was a miserable experience. And it took me, because I didn't know about any of this. I didn't know about workshops or plein air painting and anything else. And it took me a couple of years before I got at all proficient, not very much, quite frankly. And then I discovered, I think my first workshop was Plein Air Painters of America, and I went to something with them. And that opened up my eyes to this whole movement.
Yeah.
But for somebody who is brand new, and brand new can be somebody who's an experienced studio painter who's never gone outdoors painting, because that person has to relearn how to paint when they're on location. It's completely different. So what this course does is it basically says, hey, here's everything you need to know, everything about setting up equipment, everything about painting, what you're going to face outdoors, what kind of things you need, how the light's different, how, talking about dealing with the movement of air and light and color and sunshine and everything. And then on top of that, we go through demonstrations on pretty much every kind of painting: oil painting, watercolor, pastel, etc. So you're going to be playing the role about talking about equipment and so on.
Yeah, it reminds me of skiing. I don't know, the first time I went skiing, we didn't have any money to ski, of course, so you wore just jeans and you rented the skis and stuff, and you froze your butt off because once your jeans got wet, you got frozen. And it was a miserable experience. And plein air painting is the same way. As if you have the right equipment, it makes it so much easier to set up and put things together, and it makes the process easier. And if that's easier, then it's easier to paint the scene. You can focus more on painting instead of trying to figure out how to make your system work while you're uncomfortable.
Well, the goal is to make it easy, because I watch people. I'm not being critical of them. I just watch people who they've got these roller carts and they're dragging big boxes full of junk out, and they're taking just loads and loads of stuff that they just don't need. I don't think they need. And my goal in life, I started out that way, and my goal in life is to take the least amount of stuff possible. I now have a rig that I've kind of put together. I can get everything into essentially a briefcase-sized satchel, including my tripod. And I don't use that when I'm painting out of the back of my car, when I can take a little bit more stuff. But when I'm going over to Europe or something, I use it, and it's freeing. It makes it so much easier. First off, I don't have to think about all this stuff that I have to take, and I just keep a bag packed and it's ready to go. So I have 2 sets of paints and 2 sets of everything, so that I just grab that bag. I don't have to worry that nothing's in it.
That's great. One of the nice things about this whole Plein Air convention that you do is that it's allowed a place for people to sell their products. Like I was thinking of Brian Mark Taylor's Strata easel that he came up with.
Yeah,
and it's
nice
such
easel.
a great little easel, and he makes a little tiny mini one and in different sizes, and just other people's products. But it's one that's the other good thing about this movement getting larger is then there's some money to be made in easel design or paint sales or panel sales, and 20 years ago there wasn't that much money in it, so there wasn't as many options available for people. So there's a lot of things I have a whole sheet that I hand out for people to look at.
Yeah, some of the vendors have told us that they sell more product at our convention than anything else in America that they do. So that's kind of cool. And it's also great. I think what's fun about it, I didn't intend this to become a commercial for the Plein Air Convention. I apologize to our listeners, but I get so excited about it because what the reason I designed this convention is because I wanted to create something that I would have wanted to attend. And basically, for the price of a single workshop, you can go and sample 80 different instructors and watch their demos and see how they do things and pick and choose and then go out painting. And so what I think is so cool is, so I was watching one of the painters last year. I'll not mention the name, but I picked up one little tip that I thought, man, this is going to revolutionize my painting. And so rather than waiting to get home that afternoon when we went out, I implemented it right away. And I struggled with it, quite frankly. And so I went to the guy and I said, hey, he was out there walking around like you're going to be. And I said, hey, I'm trying this and it's just not working for me. He says, well, you're doing it wrong. And he showed me. And it's like, oh, well, that's perfect. Because if I'd have gone home, I wouldn't have been able to see it. And I think it's kind of cool. I love doing it, and I'm glad you're doing it with us.
Yeah, me too. I agree with you on that stuff. Because a lot of times I love to look at people's art and try to figure out how they did what they did, whatever that technique was. And what's nice about seeing it in person is you just learn faster that way, So that's I really like that about that, what you've made there. So. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a passion to help people learn to paint and get them inspired and educated and become a part of the community. And there are a lot of good things out of it. And so many people have made a lot of friends. And it's kind of like, I wrote something recently about the cafes in Paris. And the painters in Paris would gather at a couple of cafes and they'd all hang out together and they'd just basically sit around and talk painting. But most of us don't have that kind of a community in our hometown. Some of us have a couple of painters we get together with. But what I like in this event too is it's like a giant cafe in Paris. What we all do is we sit around at lunch and dinner and sit up at night and we just talk about painting, and we get away from the stress of our lives and our families and all the stuff that comes with being at home, and we just kind of treat ourselves to a week of just kind of really being immersed in painting. So it's a lot of fun for me.
It's really cool. It actually made me think about something you said about joy, and that to me that's been one of the things that I've been becoming more and more aware of, particularly like when I was judging and looking at all these paintings, and you look at art magazines and you realize how many artists there are out there. It's like, well, it's intimidating in a way, and it's also freeing in another way. It's like, wow, I could, who cares what I paint? I can paint anything I want because there's just so many just different styles and different subjects. And I think that's one of the most important parts about painting is to paint what you love, what brings you the most joy as a subject matter or a style, because there's always somebody out there for your style, for your painting, and it brings it. Whenever I do that and I paint in that state, the picture always comes out just great. So I think that's another one of those points or keys to, if you want to have a breakthrough in your work, is to focus on what brings you the most joy and of the idea that you want to paint, and instead of thinking, oh, I got to paint, this for that show because I think that's going to sell or something.
I think that's very right. I think I'm sometimes misunderstood because I teach artists how to market their work. And the one thing that I know is possible is that anyone can paint to sell, and paint to please the gallery. And to some extent, you want to make things work for them. But the minute you do that, you lose a little bit of your soul. And I think that if you paint what you love and you paint what you really care about, it's going to come through in the painting, and people will see that in the painting. It was like I recently did a piece when we were in Cuba. I took a group of people to Cuba, and there was this homeless, I don't know if he was homeless, but he was this guy, scruffy guy, he looked like Castro, and he had a beard and he had a beret with stars on it, and I couldn't speak Spanish, but I managed to communicate with him and get him to pose for me in the park. And he was just such a sweet man, and that came across. I really wanted to honor him and do a beautiful painting. And then I gave him like $20 for modeling. I only modeled for 30 minutes. And I didn't realize until later, he looked at me and he started crying, and it just was weird, and I thought, wonder why. And then somebody told me later that I gave him a year's worth of income. That $20 was a year's worth of income. So that's why I cried. But and that painting sold immediately. It came across as something that spoke to people, and I think your work is doing that too. It just I was looking at your website, which is jimwodark.com, and the paintings in there, I don't see any turkeys, and maybe you see them, but I think your passion for what you do really comes across.
Well, thank you. I hide the turkeys in the garage, but no, I do stinkers, but usually when I've been better at catching myself when it's halfway down that path, and then you just scrape it off and wipe it off. And you don't. That's one of the things I learned from Ken Oster also. Is if it's crappy, you just scrape it off, and you feel so much better afterwards. There's so much to learn from failing. It's amazing.
Well, before we wrap it up, is there any final thoughts that you'd like to impart to our audience?
Not that I can think of, other than I think that's really a big key for me, is to it's like the Field of Dreams movie, build it and they will come. If you paint what you have the most joy in, somebody will like it. You just have to have faith.
Terrific. Well, Jim, thank you so much. Our guest has been Jim Wodark. Thanks for doing this today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric.
Well, thanks again to Jim Wodark. What a great painter. I wish I had bought that painting. Man, it's one of those paintings that haunts you. You wish you had bought it. When you see a painting, grab it, because you might not be able to get it again. This is sponsored by the Plein Air Convention, held this April in San Diego. Some of the most amazing artists in the world will be the faculty to teach you, whether you're a beginner, just learning to paint, or you're an experienced pro. This is kind of like the main gathering place for all plein air painters in the world. It's an amazing event. We go outdoors and paint together. We have 4 stages with presentations and demonstrations from some of the top painters in the world, and we laugh a lot. We have a lot of fun. And we also have a giant expo hall of products and so much more. Nocturne painting at night, lessons at night, art marketing boot camp in the morning. Man, there's just so much going on. You can learn more at pleinairconvention.com. Today's interview was sponsored by Lilidol Video Productions. They have a brand new video, Oil Painting for Beginning Painters, by Laurel Daniel. The video is designed to give you everything you need to know to learn to pick up painting. You can find it at www.artvideo.com, because Lilidol's kind of a tough name. Lili, Lili, artvideo.com. We're picking up a lot of new painters because of this podcast, people discovering the podcast and saying, hey, I want to learn to paint. So that would be a good one for you. Thank you again for listening to the Plein Air podcast. The Plein Air movement is red hot. Plein Air magazine is now the #1 selling representational art magazine in America at Barnes & Noble nationwide. So drop by, pick one up, or you can get a subscription at pleinairmagazine.com. I always have fun doing this. I love talking to artists. Let's do it again sometime like next week. We'll see you then. I'm Eric Rhodes here, publisher, founder of Plein Air magazine. Remember, it's a great big world out there. You need to paint it. All right, see you. Bye-bye.